I want to talk about character development at West Point. This is really fascinating. I stumbled across this document that it just really makes a lot of sense for what leaders ought to be doing. Stay tuned.
You are listening to The Leadersmith, Darren Gerdes.
Okay, so I was looking for something else. I was looking for a completely different document about leadership development at West Point, and I stumbled across this 20-page or so character development strategy, live honorably and build trust document. And it was put out about 5 years ago. And I'm going to go through a number of the highlights of this. And if I sound like I'm reading, it's because in some places I will be reading, but then I'm going to talk about it because it's just there's something so right about the way that they're applying this from both a leadership perspective and organizational alignment perspective, character. I mean, they're hitting a lot of high notes. And it was enough that I thought, wow, there's an episode in this. So here we go. So it starts off talking about the purpose. The purpose of the West Point character development strategy is essentially to develop leaders of character who internalize the ideals of their motto, which is duty, honor, country. Okay, so that idea is it's not that we can incentivize you to do more, it's that you've internalized this. This is what you live, breathe, eat, sleep, dream about. This is who you become. And so I think that's exactly the right approach. Okay, introduction. It said, here's the U.S. Military Academy mission statement as of 2014 to educate, train, and inspire the Corps of Cadets so that each graduate is a commissioned leader of character committed to the values of duty, honor, country, and prepared for a career of professional excellence and service to the nation as an officer in the United States Army. Okay, so far so good. We know what the mission is, and we're trying to internalize it. Okay, somewhere along the way, it started talking about like, look, this has to be consistent throughout the entire organization, including each club and department and team and class and activity all the way through. And then they said this really interesting line. Character development can either be the primary goal or the ancillary goal, but every member of the West Point team involved with cadet development has an important role to play in character development. None of us can say that's someone else's responsibility. I like that because now, like, we're getting alignment. We're getting everybody on the same page. It said this in the next paragraph. The word character is derived from the word character with a K instead of a C in the middle of the sentence, which it was the permanent mark placed on a coin that determined the coin's worth. And he said at West Point, we want each graduate's character to be marked with the values of West Point and the Army ethic, right? So you are a distinctly different type of person in the way that you think and you function because you've gone through this training than you were before it or without it. They go on to say living honorably is the daily commitment to internalize and uphold the values inherent in the West Point motto duty, honor, country. And again, the goal is to serve the country. And so they're trying to inculcate these kind of values. Now, there's a subsection entitled Character and Honorable Living Are Mission Essential. Okay, so they're acknowledging that character is necessary to accomplish their missions, right? And sometimes we give short shrift to character, like we think like, oh well, as long as they got the thing done, it doesn't matter what their character is like. That's not what West Point thinks. Listen to this: strong character demonstrated by honorable living strengthens the Army profession by enabling us to build trust, which is relying on the integrity of another professional. So if we know, if we have full trust that that person has that character, it builds that trust and allows you to go faster and work through it. This is true whether it's the Army, the Marines, an average business organization. If that trust is there, if it's whole, it does things to the organization. They go on a few lines later to say weak character breeds mistrust, undermines cohesion, and degrades military effectiveness. So character leads to trust, which leads to productivity or effectiveness in military parlance. I, I love the way that they're systematically laying this out because it's so true. It's true in your organization. And if that character is not there and the trust erodes, you are going to be less productive. And that's just the way it works. They go on to cite Secretary of War Newton D. Baker in 1920, and there's a longer quote, but he said this at the end of the quote: "The inexact or untruthful soldier trifles with the lives of his fellow men and with the honor of his government, and it is therefore no matter of pride, but rather a stern disciplinary necessity that makes West Point require of her students a character for trustworthiness that knows no evasions." That's really interesting. I mean, so you're trifling with the lives of your fellow men, other soldiers, and this is fascinating because honestly, as a soldier, as an officer within the Army, you have a deep responsibility. I mean, leadership's already a deep responsibility, but in this, it's literally a potentially life or death responsibility. In the next section entitled The Need for Character Development Strategy, they talk about a survey that indicated that not all cadets have internalized the spirit of the honor code, and for 6 major reasons. One, the punishment seems too severe. And they said that cadets believe that punishment for violating the honor code is too severe for most honor violations, and that we at West Point don't make a distinction between a big lie and a little lie. Okay, now that's fascinating. I had a professor when I was in college, and he was my colleague later when I went back to teach there, who talked very often about he was a colleague. He was a class of 1958 West Point grad, and he had a colleague in class, fellow cadet, who was at the chalkboard doing a math problem, and the professor said, is that your answer? And when the professor turned his back, he wiped out a decimal point and moved it over so that he would get the answer right, and he was dismissed for that breach of integrity. That's how severely West Point believes integrity is integrity. Now, you might think that that's harsh, but again, if I'm going to trust my life to somebody to take care of me in combat, I want them to have gone through that level of training and rigor and internalized character. Okay, number 2 was personal impact. They said cadets fear tarnishing their own personal reputation and standing with their peers, or ruining someone's career because of a small offense. Yes, but you have to have that integrity. And so this becomes a problem if I prioritize the person over the integrity. Number 3 is low trust in the honor system, and they're saying, well, we don't know exactly how it's going to work out. Cadets sometimes believe that it's random or that different people are prioritized or favored, and that has to be wiped out. They said a bad cost benefit, they said it takes too much time and effort to conduct the cadet advisory board. That's like the honor board. And then number 5, if others will tolerate it, so will I. And so since some people have tried to on their own adjudicate the minor honor code violations instead of reporting everything to the board, if other people are looking the other way, maybe I can look the other way. And so that becomes a problem. And then finally, and this was the one that was most intriguing to me, was competing loyalties. They said this: from the start of their West Point experience, cadets are reminded continuously about the importance of relationships and the concept of cooperate to graduate. Both concepts contribute to the perception that turning in a fellow cadet, especially a classmate or a teammate, is the equivalent of disloyalty or betrayal. But now you have to prioritize, and you have to think, like, which value is higher? Is full character and integrity higher than that loyalty, or is the loyalty higher than integrity? And if you get it wrong, you're going to have a lot of problems. So I think that West Point is very wise for thinking through this. They said this strategy provides a plan to address these trends, which are inconsistent with good character. So they're recognizing that. And then they talked about the character goals on the individual level, the group level, and the organizational level. And when I read this, I said, I've got an episode. This is really important. So at the individual level, they're talking about, okay, there's 5 facets of character in each graduate that they want to deal with. So moral, internalization of Army values. And then, so you have these values and you have the personal courage to take action regardless of consequence. Okay. Second was performance. And again, I'm quoting these directly. And I'll provide the link to this document below if you want to follow up. Second one was performance, the sense of duty, resilience, and grit necessary to accomplish the mission and get results. Okay, so first you want to internalize the values and then you want to actually act on it and get the results. Civic, the empathy, loyalty, respect, and humility that enables an individual to treat others with dignity and display selflessness. Yeah, you want to follow that kind of leader, not someone who's too big for his own britches, right? Leadership, and I love this definition of leadership. It's the ability to inspire and develop. Now, notice how he said inspire and develop. It's not talking about, I'm going to tell you what to do. That's an order. It's not that kind of thing. It's the ability to inspire and develop others while establishing a safe, positive command climate where everyone thrives while achieving tangible results. Oh, don't you wish you worked in that kind of environment? That's a great definition of leadership. And then finally, social, the ability to act with the proper professional decorum, and that's based on Army values. Okay, then after you have those 5 categories for the individual level, you have the group level. The group level was 1, positive command climate, which is treating people with dignity and a safe environment like we just talked about. 2, a winning culture. Well, I hope so. I mean, if it's a live or die kind of scenario, I want you to have a living culture consistent with Army values. Number 3 was enforcing standards, and that is, so this is the group level. So there, in whatever group you're in, you want to have a positive command climate, a winning culture. You want to enforce these standards. You're talking about self-policing these standards. And then 4, maintaining proper loyalty. And again, here's how they define it: harnessing the strength of cohesion and accountability in small organizations while maintaining values consistent with duty, honor, country. Now, that line grabbed me. It might not grab you, but let me try to unpack it. So harnessing the strength of cohesion and accountability in small organizations. So think about when you're at work, your department has a greater hold on you than the overall organization does. Okay, you're just tied more closely to those people in your small subunit at work. But you also want to maintain the values of the whole. And in this case, we're talking about West Point, or actually the entire U.S. Army. Okay, so harnessing the strength of cohesion and accountability in small organizations while maintaining the values consistent with duty, honor, country. Okay, so they get it. I mean, everything in this document, there's nothing where I was reading through and I was like, well, I don't know if they should be doing that. Everything's right. The individual values, the 5 individual values of moral, performance, civic, leadership, social, and then these group values, like where you're trying to maintain harmony within the group. But then it goes to the academy level. All policies and messages, command decisions have to be consistent with these espoused values, they say. The staff, faculty, coaches, and exemplars have to lead and inspire by example, right? They can't be dictators and expect their cadets to not be dictators. So there's something really, really powerful here. Time allocation. Protect the adequate time for mentor relationships and structured reflection. I love that. Now, I remember reading that Eisenhower in World War II wrote back to his son, who was a cadet at West Point. He said, the one quality that can be developed by studious reflection and practice is the leadership of men. And what a great line, right? And so you have to have practice, but you also have to have studious reflection. And they're understanding that in this time allocation. And we're going to talk about it a little bit more. The next one was assessment. They need to assess it periodically. And then the 5th one was a little strange sounding to me, but it makes sense when you read it. Talent management. He said the best candidates are selected, all cadets are properly evaluated, and the cadets who do not demonstrate proper character are either placed into a developmental program or separated. So I get it. So managing those cadets as they either move up or we move them out if they're not going to be the kind of leaders that are going to be sound leaders of character who espouse the values of duty, honor, country. Okay, the next section says character development, guiding principles, and models. It said West Point character development starts with cadet basic training and continues through graduation. I think it takes like 47 months, they said somewhere in here. 47 months, okay? The process begins with education so that they understand what is expected of them as cadets and officers. So sometimes we think of education as just like classrooms. I'm a college professor. I understand that. But it has to go beyond just classroom. Let's talk about it. Read your book. Let's talk about this in class. It has to go beyond that. That's why I spend a lot of time with class projects, because the experience is going to be as important, or maybe even more important than what I teach in a classroom. But it starts with the classroom. Okay, next, then they'll experience several challenges. And that's what I mean by the experiential part of the learning. Next, after the experience, which should make them uncomfortable, we must provide for them a time for a structured reflection. Now, this is something where I initially in my career didn't do very well with helping my students get it, because I understood the classroom, I understand the experience part, but giving them time to process, to journal, to reflect, to think through things was so important to solidifying it. It's as important as sleep is to memory. Okay, so after the experience, which should make them uncomfortable, like if you're not uncomfortable, if you're not being stretched, something went wrong. Okay, then they need to journal about it, or think about it, or talk with a mentor, or do something. And then they said this, finally, it's an iterative process that continues and goes on, and there's going to be many evolutions of it. Okay, so that's powerful. I mean, if that's all they said, this would be enough, but it goes on. There's guiding principles. So the goal is, first, internalization, not compliance. Number two, character development is iterative. It's a continuous process that goes on through all 47 months. Number three, character development at West Point is everyone's responsibility. They say this: once each cadet takes ownership of his or her own development, every member of the West Point team must also teach, support, mentor, and inspire cadets as they navigate the iterative process of character development. Like, it has to be consistent all the way through, or it's not going to work. And then they said character development must be deliberate. Yeah, this is, they say a few lines down, permanent change comes from a deliberate effort. It doesn't just magically happen. And then finally, leaders develop leaders. And that just, I get that one. So when I was in high school and in college, let me talk about high school first. When I was in high school, I was an Army JROTC. This was my first and really a very formative leadership experience for me. And so I went through a cadet process. It's not West Point by any means. It's a high school level version of this. And so I found out that very early that the experience of being the cadet was far more powerful than the classroom experience. Like the experience of doing the things and being in charge of other people and failing a bit, and then trying to figure out what I did wrong and how to do it better, and those kind of things, and how to lead other people. That was a very formative experience. He said this: the best way to provide purpose, motivation, and direction for a cadet's character development is to be a moral exemplar and mentor. Okay, and so, as they say, we must invest time, effort, and attention not only to educate and train, but also to inspire and challenge each cadet. But when you're learning it, when you as a leader are becoming a leader of others, you learn this better, and your leaders need to be intentional about that development. Okay, then they said character development model. They showed this thing, and I'm not going to read everything about it, but there's this great model. So at the top, it has personal readiness development. Like, you're ready, like you have the stuff to be able to go through this academically. You're ready. Okay. Then the developmental experiences are, you have an assessment, challenge, and support. And so you have this readiness of, let's say, a classroom. This is what you need to do. Then you go out and you have that challenge, that difficult, unsettling, stretching challenge. And then you have the support and you have the assessment, and that's part of the continuum. But then from there, you get to reflect. And if you don't reflect, a big piece of the puzzle is out, but you get to reflect and think about it. You have a mentor that's working with you, and or you're journaling about it and reflecting and thinking through it. And then that leads to new capacities and new knowledge and new ability. You literally grow through that process. Now, you add personal readiness plus the developmental experiences, and reflection and new capacities, plus time. This takes time. Leadership always takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not something that, like, you can't rush it. It just is something that has to work. And then I appreciate what they did with that after that, so they have four different essentially developmental programs at West Point. There's academic, like the classroom. There's military skills. There's physical, PT, physical training, ability to become stronger and faster. And then there's character. And then they map out moral, civic, performance, leadership, and social against that and show like where the primary emphasis of character lies based on that. And so they're thinking through this. I really, really I was profoundly moved by how deeply they're thinking through this. Uh, and then they conclude this with this specified tasks. Okay, specified tasks are like what is, now that we have laid all this out, what's incumbent upon us here at West Point to do this thing? So first, every department, it's incumbent upon you. So it says the first actions required of every department and directorate follow. And so it doesn't matter if you're the soccer coach or you're a professor in a classroom or you're a rifle instructor or whatever it is, every department has to do these things. One, they have to have a shared understanding. So they said this: department heads, coaches, directors must ensure that all members of the organization read the character development strategy and understand the character development model. Now, this is a great starting point, and this is where many organizations fall flat, and then they become siloed, and they don't know why. They're acting at cross purposes because they're not all singing from the same song sheet. Okay, so you can have the mission statement on the wall, and if there's nothing else beyond the mission statement on the wall, you're just pulling one way and somebody else is pulling a different way. That's not it. I mean, if your mission is excellence, that's different than if your mission is growth, and that's different than if your mission is something else. So we all have to be pulling the same direction, and this lays everything out about what character development means, duty, honor, country, here at West Point. So shared understanding, that's number one. Number two was assessment. So they have to go through a process of assessing this periodically to see if they're actually doing what they're doing. Number three was activity inventory. This was key to the alignment necessary for the organization. The activity inventory said this: department heads, coaches, and directorates will identify at least 5 significant character development activities that utilize the guidelines. So what they're saying is that regardless of what you do, you have to figure out what of what you do develops the character, or create something that develops character in what you do. Number 4, expand the conversation. It says this: department heads, coaches, and directors will brainstorm ideas to further the discussion of character development. Yeah, so it has them focused on character development. Number 5 said reward excellence in character. Department heads, coaches, and directors will identify ways to publicly recognize and reward examples of individual character and honorable living. Now that's great, because what you reward, you get more of. Right? So incentives matter. That's the first rule in economics. And if you are making a clear statement that this is what we want from the organization by rewarding that thing. If you set up a reward system that doesn't match what your goals are or your mission is or what your organization's purpose is, you're going to be all over the map. But they're trying to align it to character by rewarding excellence in character. Number 6 was evaluate policies for consistency throughout the organization. So they were going to identify policies that are inconsistent with espoused values, impede character development, or send mixed messages. And to the degree that you can eradicate those, you're going to be in much better shape. You're going to be aligned. And then finally, an annual report would be provided to the superintendent as an overview of the assessment of these 6 implementation tasks. I was just so I was so thrilled to read this. I know that sounds like really nerdy. I was thrilled to read it, but think about this: on every level, on the individual level, on the group level, on the organizational level, they're clear about aligning what is important to the leaders who are supposed to be imbibing and just becoming the values of duty, honor, and country. It has to be internalized, and to internalize it, it has to be consistent. And so these people are going to get character in the classroom, character by their mentor, character with the experiences that they're going through, character in the journaling and reflection with their mentors, right? All the way through, they're going to character, and that's how you actually get to that place of character. Aristotle talked about, if you want character, do the thing again and again and again, and that's what you become. Okay, so they've done a great job, and your organization can use the same kind of thinking. And if you think that this is going to be helpful to you, again, check below and I'll link it below. All right, so that's about all that I have for this episode. I hope that helps you. For the quotation for contemplation, it's Eisenhower. I talked about him earlier, but he said again in that letter to his son at West Point, and this was when he was a supreme Allied commander in World War II, and he's writing to his son who's studying at West Point. He says the one quality that can be developed by studious reflection and practice is the leadership of men. Wow. Studious reflection and practice. If you want to be a leader, you have to actually lead. You have to actually do it. You can't, it's like swimming or riding a bike. You can't just read about it or listen to podcasts about it. You have to actually do it. And then once you do it, reflect on what you did and see what worked, what didn't work, and how you can grow and be a better leader in the future. But this is a great example, and I hope it helps you become the kind of leader that you would want to follow. Thanks for your time.